Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about to enter a question and answer period, but there's a couple that have joined the presenters that have joined or sitting on the panel. Is Lisa Sharp, MLA's Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, and also Michael Crowley, MLA's new General Manager for Producer Consultation and Adoption. Lisa and her team are responsible for delivering MLA's world-class data and insights, marketing strategy and communications for the Australian red meat industry, both domestically and around the globe. Michael Crowley and his team have been given the responsibility for identifying research priorities for the industry and driving adoption and uptake of research outcomes. The focus of Michael's team is the commercial drivers that improve on-farm profitability. Michael's team is also responsible for managing MLA's investment in Meat Standards Australia, beef and sheep genetics and genomics, and industry consultation through our regional research committees. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we'll do is open it up for question and answers now. As previously, we've got 4 microphones. If you could make your way to the microphone and when designated, state your name and then indicate where your question is going. Damien.
Damien Jensen, Bairnsdale. I'd like to address a question to Lisa Sharp. In the co-marketing budget, I noticed that over $200,000 was awarded to Tees, JBS and AACo. These are major producers, they're processors and they are wholesalers. Why are we subsidising non-retail people who are quite big and ugly enough to stand on their own feet?
Thanks for your question, Damien. In response, I'll just make sure everybody understands what the collaborative marketing program is, and that's where we will match individual contributions with levy dollars. It's a very, very tight eligibility criteria. And the companies that you name, they all have branded products, individually branded products that go to here in the domestic market and also export markets. And through the collaborative marketing program, what we're seeking to do is to remove some of the risk of entry into those markets and building those brands in particular markets. All those brands have a really strong foundation of product of Australia, and we certainly believe there are halo benefits for the broader product of Australia on the back of those collaborative marketing investments. But certainly it is branded product in international markets and here in Australia.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I've got some questions here that have come through on the live stream, or 1 or 2 questions come through on the live stream, so I'll ask them while other people are coming towards the mics. Michael Crowley, there's been some developments in the genetic space recently with the formation of a new genetics task force. What's the aim of that task force and what does MLA expect it to deliver?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And so what we've done is we've formed a National Livestock Genetics Consortium. And the National Livestock Genetics Consortium is aiming to double the rate of genetic gain in our livestock industries by 2022. And the way that we'll do that is by building value chain profitability. And the only way we'll do that is by reducing cost, by getting better collaboration across research and development, and really identifying ways of seamlessly transferring information along the supply chain. So there's really 4 key strategies that we're working on in the genetic space, and that's identifying disruptive technologies. It's about driving culture change. It's about open data source platforms, and it's about world-leading R&D. And so when we're thinking about disruptive technologies, it's about cost-effective genomic tests. It's really about linking our genetic tests to those key commercial drivers that actually return value back through the supply chain, and really that full traceability to actual value. So if we can reduce costs, we're really going to drive adoption of that technology, and that's going to add a lot of value to our production system. But then in terms of culture change, it's really about how do we get the value proposition right for the commercial sector to value genetics. I think at the moment we've got really low amounts of actual commercial data going back into our genetic programs, so back into breed plan, and the Beef Information Nucleus program is the biggest source of actual carcass data getting linked back in through to our seed stock genetics. And so if we can actually get a real culture change around how we value genetics, we're going to solve some of those issues. And what we're doing is engaging the users of the commercial technology to actually help drive our R&D priorities and making sure we've got very clear alignment with adoption when we're investing in research. In terms of open data platforms, that's really about getting our databases that currently exist to talk to each other and allowing and creating that opportunity for the people who own the data to share the data where there's mutual benefit in doing so. And so that's really going to disrupt some of our current models. It's going to lead to the ability to have multi-breed analysis. I think the sheep industry have done a tremendous job when you look at their model in terms of multi-breeds all on one platform, and the beef industry can learn a little bit from that, and we're going to see some investment in multi-breed analysis. And around world-leading R&D, well, the first round of our project call resulted in 23 projects coming forward, $40 million of investment, and most of that, so well over $38 million, was actually applying through the MLA donor company for funding. We're actually seeing our levy investment in the sheep industry being invested through the sheep CRC, and there was only a couple of projects that were requesting levy dollars from the beef side that's well within our budget that's approved through the annual implementation plan. So we're actually seeing a lot of private money coming together through the research institutions, through the universities, being leveraged through the donor company to really ramp up the rate of genetic gain. So it's actually a pretty exciting space to be in.
Thanks, Michael. Blair, microphone 3, I think.
Blair Angus, just following on from that, Michael, who's determining that genetic gain? And really, ultimately, our ultimate judge should be the consumer, and all of our sensory testing now is quite old. Do you have any plans to perhaps put it back into the real judge's hands and determine what the genetic gain is?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good question, Blair. I think that's where, when we're really talking about aligning the key commercial drivers, it is actually putting the consumer first. And when we're looking at what's going to drive genetic gain, it's about delivering better outcomes for consumers. It's the only point where money's entering the supply chain. And so when we look at what are those commercial drivers that increase value, it's improving market compliance specifications. I mean, every percentage increase in MSA compliance is an additional $16 million returned to the industry. So that's where really we need to get that genetic investment aligning with our consumer outcomes.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone else got questions? Want to make your way to a mic while you're in the room? And while you're thinking about doing that, I've got another one, the second one. It's actually for you again, Michael. MSA adoption across the beef industry is really taking off. In terms of beef, where does MSA go next, and what's happening with MSA in the sheep meat industry?
Thanks, Jeff. I knew I wasn't going to get off lightly being down the end here. But yeah, so look, what we've done is we've worked with industry. We've got a beef and sheep MSA task forces, and we've developed a 5-year plan that's really set some key priorities for the program. So by 2020, we want to ensure that all cattle and sheep are eligible for MSA grading. So we're looking at identifying the blockers in the pathways to at least create the opportunity for all livestock to be MSA graded. We want to actually make sure that more cuts per carcass graded are being packed as MSA, and that's enabling a fitness for purpose for all cuts to match a consumer outcome. And that ultimately is also going to add a lot of value to the supply chain. One of the key changes is that we're looking for brand owners to drive the success of MSA. So MSA is a quality system from paddock to plate that allows us to make decisions on what impacts on eating quality, and brand owners offer the point of difference. So we're looking to support brand owners to drive that point of difference and add value to those brands that ultimately delivers better returns through the supply chain. And we need to work with producers to get a better understanding of the program. So we're really working on moving from an awareness of MSA through to a really deeper understanding, so that when all of the technologies come together, we're actually able to use that data to make better decisions about what drives profit. From the sheep industry point of view, we're really relying on the outcomes out of the objective measurement, rural R&D for profit, to deliver us tools to be able to measure eating quality traits at chain speed that will allow us to build a cuts-based model for lamb and sheep meat That will also help us develop an index, like we've done with beef, to measure the eating quality of the flock, and when we can actually measure improvements in eating quality over time in the sheep industry. So we're looking at, you know, how does the eating quality of older categories of sheep impact on consumer acceptability. We're looking at the cuts-based model in lamb, an objective technology that allows us to really drive some change in that space.
Thanks, Michael. Peter on mic 2.
Yeah, Peter Hughes, Georgina. Yeah, whilst I congratulate you on all the work you're doing, and I think it's wonderful work, but I think we're forgetting something. I think we forget that a lot of Australia is a long, long way from anywhere, and I suppose you're aware that there are areas in Western Australia where once you put a beast, before you put a beast on a truck, it's 3,000 k before he reaches a processing plant. Yeah, I think that's, and certainly some of our very productive country, like the Barkly Tableland, it's 1,400 k to a processing plant. You know, to put an animal that's been looked after and then put him on a truck, it's like running a marathon before you kill him. And we talk about all these hairy-fairy ideas about eating quality, and then we go and do that to them, not only from an eating quality angle, it's also an animal welfare angle.
Yep.
You know, whether we start to look at air-conditioned trucks or something, we've had the transport industry came a long way about 30 years ago, and now it's hit the wall. It's not improving anymore, and I think there is probably ways that we can improve those trucks, or we can start processing out in those areas. And I can see that there is work being done on processing, and maybe we can do it. But at this stage, any processing plant off the coast went broke in the past. Maybe that won't happen in the future because of foreign labour and probably better ways of doing it. But there's so much of Australia that's so productive and so healthy and green and that's so good. But it's just, if you live out there, you feel quite forgotten. Some places, you know, the roads are atrocious, and it is a battle. I know one of our places, at one stage, they were 6 hours on a truck before they got to the boundary. You know, these are the sort of things that we go on and get in front of ourselves a bit, I think. And, there's a lot of cattle being carted a long way in Australia, and it is an issue, and it is very expensive. And I'm sure that we could go back and do a bit of work on our transport or our processing and get it all a little bit more into perspective. Thank you.
You respond to that, Michael?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, and when we look at our work around long distance transport and the impact on eating quality, we've done some work where we've transported livestock up to 36 hours, including then an additional 12 hours in lairage, and that's where the window is at the moment. I think when we look at some of the other pathways to slaughter, we actually are looking at when we're outside of those boundaries, and when we look at sale yards, we're looking at boats coming across from King Island to Tasmania. We're yet to do some rail transport work, but one of the things that we need to think about and how commercial it is and how practical it is depends on, I think, the relationship a lot of times as well, but we look at then the recovery times, at whether we can get livestock closer to the plant, and then how do we actually manage those animals appropriately to get them to back up to where their muscle glycogen levels were at the time in which they were loaded. And then also, if they do fall out of that window, what is the impact for the consumer? And if we can measure that and monitor that, that's what we're looking for when we're talking about the eligibility of livestock for grading. It's about being able to predict those outcomes regardless of pathway to slaughter. And there's some, I guess there's going to be some good learnings coming out of that work as well.
Thanks, Michael. Kev, on 1.
I have the solution for you, Michael and Peter.
Perfect.
Of course, the feedlot industry, as our president this morning so aptly put, is an integral part of the beef industry. And I can assure you, and in fact, at Sandalwood Feedlot, we have conducted a lot of trial work on cattle that have been moved around, from out around Birdsville, etc. Fat cattle, channel fat cattle. And we've been able to put those cattle on feed for a minimum period of 21 days, because if you look at the science, it takes 21 days to rehydrate an animal. So the work's been done, and I'm not trying to get a job for myself. I'm only here to help, as some politicians. But I can assure you the work has been done. The science has come out of the United States. To rehydrate an animal is 21 days. And we've done it with some cooperative cattle producers from the Channel Country, and it works particularly well, because we know that by the time you transport an animal about 1,500 k, I'm only going to talk about the work that we've done, you've had a shrink in the order of 15 to 20%. So by the time you rehydrate it, and then you only ship it a small way to those coastal city abattoirs, you're looking at less than 5 to 10%. So the answer's there, and we can help you.
Yep.
But I actually have a question, if I may, to Jane. Give you a break, Michael. Jane, for better or worse, you might know me as the chair of LPA. And I'm most interested, you said that as we speak, these systems, the integrated systems are being transferred across to your program. The question that I have, and one that we've grappled with for quite a while, is, and you may not have the answer, but I'd like to know if you do, is how will MLA, NLIS fund the integration of these very, very important programs? I'm sorry if I put you on the spot, but if I have, I'm happy to put that question on notice.
Sure, and perhaps if Joe quickly from NLIS has anything further to add, but certainly I guess the commitment from MLA and creating the subsidiary company is to make sure that the integration of those systems happens quite seamlessly. In terms of the funding associated with it, there's a commitment there to actually support that process. So at the moment, that's pretty much all I'm aware of in terms of the strategy, but if you've got the answer, then...
Righto, thanks, Jane. Microphone 4, Ian McCamley.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I, like Kev, also have the answer for Peter. It's called decentralisation of beef processing. And I'll give you a good example of it. When the Lakes Creek Meatworks was built in Rockhampton, the meatworks pretty close to your hometown, Jeffrey, that was 1871. Now cast your mind back to 1871. You know, and anything you do in life and you want to make a bit of money, logistics comes into it. It's the key. Get logistics right and that'll underpin what you do. And here we are, we sit there and we lug cattle from bloody miles and miles. And do you realise that livestock transports are the most inefficient transport in the country? They operate 52% loaded, 48% empty. It's just dumb. It costs you 5 times as much to transport a live animal than it does to transport a box of beef in a fridge van. You know, we've got, and these meatworks by and large are located in suburbs. You know, we're trying to work out ways of getting road trains through Rockhampton to get them through suburbs to plants. They stop at 27 sets of traffic lights and we wonder why we get dark cutters, for God's sake. I mean, you pull up at McDonald's in Beenleigh, you know, on the way to the Gold Coast to have a burger and all you can smell is the meatworks. You know, it's just incredible that they're still there. The land's worth a fortune. We need to be working with governments to try and move these plants out into regional areas. And the regional areas have all grown. Everything's growing. All the country's been developed out there. They're all prime cattle. When I was a kid in Western Queensland, you went and bought store cattle now. Then you can't buy them anymore because they're all prime. They're all finished because the country's been developed. So let's catch up with our processing build some brand new meatworks out there off the coast and start saving a bit of money and saving a few lives on roads and everything else that comes with it.
Couldn't agree more, Ian. We probably should have had that question this morning, but when we had the Peak Council guys here. But yeah, Michael.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Mick Hewitt, Hewitt Cattle Australia. I'll change the tone a little bit, and I just was hoping to direct a question towards Lisa. So for whether it be right or wrong, I guess I come from an operational background but have the good fortune, or possibly in some people's world, the misfortune of spending a lot of time in urban areas these days. I was quite intrigued to understand what MLA's response has been, or were you aware of in the first place, and what has your, or what has been, or is your planned reaction to the three-part SBS series that was recently run by Matthew Evans?
Okay.
What I find concerning as a beef producer, who, as I say, has the luxury of living amongst our urban customers, is to a lot of the good presentations that have been presented here today. Of course, there's some fantastic initiatives that MLA do, and that is certainly not in question. The question is, but why, when I walk down the street of Brisbane and I'm constantly stopped by my colleagues who know I'm involved in the beef industry, and the first thing they speak about is the SBS series. And so I would have thought that would be a higher priority than specific targeted campaigns that are currently run by MLA. So I think it's a case of, the question is, were we aware of it? How are we reacting to it? And are we going to continue to be reactive or proactive? Because to the producer, it seems we're very reactive in these types of scenarios. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Mick. With respect to the Matthew Evans SBS program, we are absolutely aware of that program. We were contacted approximately 11 months ago when SBS was starting the program, and what we wanted to do was ensure that we could provide, we wanted to be constructive, and we wanted to make sure that fact-based information was made available to the producers of the show. Indeed, MLA, on behalf of industry, coordinated a number of interviews with members across the production right through to retailing. So we were aware of the program. We certainly, in conjunction with the peak industry councils, who will typically are the champion for the producer when there is, perhaps an issue, behind the scenes working very closely with the peak industry councils in the event that there was very adverse media reaction to the SBS program. So knew well in advance, and there'd been quite a series of preparation in consultation with the peak industry councils. The report aired last Thursday, I think it was last Thursday evening or the week before, sorry. Immediately we have media monitoring and social media monitoring, and we watch very carefully reactions to the program. Not so good things about red meat are unfortunately not new. In our opinion, there was not a lot of new news in that program, and the distinct and indeed absolute lack of social media pickup and mass media pickup meant we didn't want to throw fuel on the fire, and certainly our recommendation, and in conjunction with the peak industry councils, was not to get on. There were a few inaccuracies. There were things that were not ideal, but we did not want to add to the fire. The reality is there is a very small number of consumers in Australia who are outraged about the practices of the red meat industry, as indeed they are with many other industries. There's a small group of consumers who are concerned, but the vast majority are curious, or you know what, it's not a real driver for them. So our job is to monitor very carefully how many are outraged, how many are concerned, always make sure we have compelling evidence available about the very good practices within the red meat industry, and to work with the peak industry councils and other influencers. Mick, if I'd gotten on television Friday morning and said, look, there were some gross inaccuracies in that program, and it was Lisa Sharp from Meat and Livestock Australia, it's not credible. When other influencers speak about our industry, and particularly when producers speak about other producers' good practices, that's far more credible. So we're aware, very, very strong plan of attack. I guess in addition to always being ready for those types of issues, it is MLA, whether it be in nutrition, in stewardship of our natural resource base, we are always building evidence and ensuring that evidence is in the hands of influencers and policymakers. I trust that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Last one before we break. Kev on mic 1, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, for better or worse, I think for better, the experience, I was part of that, Sandalwood, not I. Sandalwood was part of that program. I thought that beef, I watched all 3 programs. He absolutely knocked the crap out of chicken. He belted the pig industry as though mercilessly, I believe. But I think beef come out of it very, very well. And I'm sure that most producers in this room would have friends, people that they associate with that are nothing to do with the land. And I've had several people call me up, very kindly said how well I did, but more importantly said beef did not get bashed up. And I agree totally with Lisa. I think, and I can report, MLA, Matt, called me in advance and said, Kev, we're on standby. If you need help, if you get a bashing from the media or whatever, we're there to help you. So MLA was prepared. We were prepared. I can tell you, I got 2 daughters that have bloody been preparing me for 6 months. So we were prepared, and I really think, and I commend MLA because they did call me, I didn't call them. And they were ready on standby. And I agree with Lisa that we come out of it. I think we had Matthew Evans and his film crew and that at our home during the filming of that. We had a wonderful barbecue and we made sure that they had all the facts. They wanted to look at HGPs in cattle. The most productive thing that we've had, Michael, for the last 20 years that I know was HGPs in the cattle industry. And they wanted to knock the crap out of that. We talked them out of it, in a sense, I think. We let that slip. They really wanted to attack antibiotics. Oh, you feedlotters, you fill these cattle up with antibiotics. Whoa, hang on. We made sure, and I'm sure that MLA were involved in making sure that they had the facts. Now, if they had have, I believe, and I had the discussion with Matt, if they attack the facts and really get it screwed up, then we should go and crawl all over them. They didn't do that, and so I think the best thing to do, silence, like when you get home late at night, when you've been out playing cards late, best thing to do is come in as quietly as you can. So I think Lisa's got it right. I think we should just go along quietly.
Thanks very much, Kev. Look, that concludes the question. If you could keep the applause going for our panel up here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. And look, don't forget, we're going to break for afternoon tea. We'll be back in the room at about 3:25. And on your way out, don't forget to register. So please, if you haven't registered, make sure you do. Thank you.